The night was supposed to be quiet, but inside the luxurious penthouse, the sound of ripping paper sliced through the air like a blade. Daniel Thorne, a man who prided himself on his charm and ruthless ambition, leaned back in his leather chair, a smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. In his hand, he held the divorce papers he had just signed without hesitation. His wife, Ava Sinclair, stood frozen, her hands trembling as she cradled her swollen belly. 6 months pregnant, her eyes glistened with disbelief and raw pain. "You'll never survive without me," Daniel sneered, tossing the papers onto the table as though they were nothing more than yesterday's news. "You're a nobody, just a burden with a baby. I deserve better than this. Better than you." The words hit Ava like daggers. She had given her heart, her trust, and her future to the man now staring at her with cold detachment. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "How could you do this to me? To our child?" But Daniel's gaze slid away. His mind was already elsewhere, thinking of Selena Moore, the young, ambitious secretary who'd been warming his bed for months. He felt no shame. To him, Ava was dead weight, weak, poor, and powerless. The pregnancy didn't soften him. It hardened his resolve. He wanted freedom, prestige, and the kind of woman who matched the image of success he had built. Rain hammered against the tall windows as Ava's knees buckled beneath her. She clutched the edge of the marble counter, fighting to stay upright. But Daniel didn't move to help her. Instead, he grabbed his coat, adjusted his cufflinks, and prepared to leave. "You'll be fine," he said coldly. "Maybe you'll learn to stand on your own 2 feet, or maybe you'll crawl back, begging me to take you in. Either way, I won't regret this." Ava's lips trembled. She wanted to scream, to plead, to tell him she wasn't the helpless woman he believed. But the words lodged in her throat. All she could feel was the crushing weight of betrayal. For years she had hidden her true self, her true legacy, all in the name of love. Daniel had no idea who he was discarding, no clue of the storm that would one day sweep him away. The front door slammed shut, echoing like a final sentence. Alone in the cavernous apartment, Ava sank to the floor, her sobs mixing with the pounding rain outside. Her hand rested protectively on her stomach as she whispered to her unborn child, "I'll protect you. I'll rise again. He thinks I'm weak, but one day he'll see the truth." Outside, Daniel stepped into a waiting car where Selena sat in the back seat, lips painted red, eyes glinting with victory. As the car pulled away, Ava wiped her tears. Deep inside, something shifted. Pain was turning into steel, and in that moment, though no one could see it yet, the Dynasty's heir was awakening. Daniel thought he had broken her, but the reckoning was only beginning. The city outside never cared about one woman's broken heart. Lights flickered across New York's skyline, cars rushed down wet streets, and life moved on. But for Ava Sinclair, time had slowed to a painful crawl. She stood at a crossroads no one else could see. To the world, she was just another abandoned wife, discarded while carrying her first child. But beneath the fragile exterior lived a truth even Daniel Thorne could never have imagined. Ava had mastered the art of blending in. For years, she lived quietly in a modest apartment, working as a bookstore clerk. She wore simple dresses, tied her hair back in unremarkable styles, and never drew attention to herself. Her neighbors thought she was just another struggling young woman trying to make ends meet in an unforgiving city. Even Daniel, the man who vowed to love her, believed she was ordinary. That was exactly what Ava wanted him to believe. Because Ava Sinclair was not ordinary at all. She was the only daughter of William Sinclair, a titan of industry whose name commanded respect across continents. Her late mother had raised her away from the suffocating grip of wealth, choosing instead to give Ava the gift of normalcy. Her mother believed love should never be bought with money, and Ava had taken those lessons to heart. So she hid her lineage, tucked away her inheritance, and stepped into a world where she could be loved for who she was, not for her family name. When she met Daniel, she truly believed she had found that kind of love. He was charismatic, ambitious, and attentive in ways that made her heart bloom. They shared dinners of cheap pasta, long walks in Central Park, and whispered dreams under flickering city lights. To Ava, those moments were priceless. She gave him her trust without hesitation. She believed he loved her, not the Sinclair fortune she concealed behind layers of silence. But over time, cracks had appeared. Daniel began to complain about money, about the weight of responsibility. He resented her modest salary and nagged her about expenses. Yet Ava never revealed her secret. She endured the criticism, telling herself love required sacrifice. She worked longer hours, clipped coupons, and quietly endured. She thought carrying his child would bring them closer, would remind him of the family they had promised to build together. Instead, her pregnancy only fueled his disdain. Now, as she sat alone in the dim glow of her small rented room after the divorce, Ava felt both broken and strangely alive. For the first time, she was forced to confront the truth. The man she had given everything to had never truly seen her. He had thrown her away like something disposable. But Ava knew something he did not. She was not disposable. She carried the blood of a dynasty in her veins. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message glowed on the screen. "We need to meet. It's time you claim what's yours." The sender was a name she hadn't seen in years. Her father's trusted lawyer. Ava's breath caught in her throat. The past she had tried to bury was calling her back. She looked into the mirror, eyes red but burning with a new fire. Daniel thought he had ended her story, but her real story was only beginning. The night of the Sinclair Foundation Gala glittered like a crown jewel in New York's social calendar. The Grand Metropolitan Hotel had been transformed into a palace of glass and gold. Crystal chandeliers rained light across marble floors, polished so perfectly they mirrored every diamond heel and tuxedoed stride. Waiters in white gloves floated between guests carrying trays of champagne, their movements rehearsed with military precision. It was a night where fortunes were flaunted, alliances were forged, and reputations could be shattered in a heartbeat. Daniel Thorne relished every second of it. With his mistress Selena Moore on his arm, he walked through the gilded double doors like he owned the room. Cameras flashed, capturing his smug smile and her ruby gown that clung to her every curve. To the crowd, they looked like the perfect couple. Ambitious, radiant, untouchable. Daniel thrived on whispers of admiration and envy. For him, tonight wasn't about charity. It was about proving that leaving his pregnant wife had been an upgrade, not a mistake. Selena leaned close, her voice sweet as poison. "They're staring at us, Daniel. Can you feel it? We're the power couple now." Daniel's lips curved into a smirk. "Let them stare. Tonight, the world knows I've moved on." Around them, conversations buzzed about mergers, stock surges, and overseas investments. Laughter rose like a tide. Glasses clinked. Behind the polished smiles, deals were being struck with silent nods and subtle handshakes. It was a battlefield disguised as a ballroom, and Daniel believed he was one of the victors. But not everyone in the room was celebrating him. There were whispers, hushed but sharp, that followed him through the crowd. Some pitied Ava, the wife he had discarded. Others wondered if Daniel had overplayed his hand. But he didn't care. In his mind, Ava was history. Tonight was about flaunting his future. On the far side of the ballroom, a spotlight illuminated the Sinclair family crest above the stage. This was no ordinary gala. It was the annual celebration of the dynasty Ava was born into. Daniel had no idea. To him, this was just another event to rub shoulders with power brokers and bask in Selena's shallow triumphs. As the orchestra shifted into a waltz, Daniel pulled Selena close, guiding her confidently onto the dance floor. The room swayed with couples moving in elegant rhythm, their jewels sparkling under the chandeliers. Daniel caught his reflection in a gilded mirror and straightened his tie. In his mind, he was untouchable. Then the grand doors opened. A hush rippled across the room as heads turned. Heels clicked against marble with a steady, deliberate rhythm. A figure stepped inside, radiant in a gown of midnight silk that shimmered like starlight. Her chin was lifted, her presence commanding, and though Daniel's heart faltered for just a second, he quickly masked it with arrogance, because walking into the gala, every eye upon her was Ava Sinclair. The orchestra faltered, the whispers grew louder, and champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. The woman Daniel had discarded was back, and the illusion of his power was about to unravel. The ballroom, moments ago filled with music and laughter, now buzzed with a tension sharp enough to cut glass. All eyes were fixed on Ava Sinclair as she entered. Her midnight gown flowed behind her like liquid shadows, her every step measured, poised, and defiant. The glow of pregnancy softened her face, but her eyes burned with a resolve no one in the room had ever seen. She was no longer the timid woman Daniel had ridiculed. Tonight, she carried herself like destiny itself. Daniel's smirk faltered for a split second before he plastered it back on. He tightened his grip on Selina's waist, pulling her closer as if to remind the crowd who he belonged to now. Selina, basking in the attention, let out a low laugh that was sharp enough for Ava to hear even from across the ballroom. "Well, well," Selina purred, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "Look who decided to crawl out of the shadows. I almost didn't recognize her. Dressed like she belongs here." Daniel chuckled, though the sound was forced. "Don't worry, darling. She's just here to make a scene. Poor Ava never did know her place. She still thinks she matters." Selina tilted her head, eyes glittering with malice. "Pregnant and alone? She's pathetic, Daniel. Look at her, trying so hard to pretend she's not broken. Everyone here knows she's nothing without you." The words stung, but Ava didn't flinch. She kept her chin high as she moved deeper into the room. Guests parted like waves, whispering as she passed. Some pitied her, some admired her courage, and others simply marveled at the audacity of a discarded wife daring to return to a stage like this. Daniel, feeding off the attention, guided Selina toward Ava. He wanted a confrontation. He wanted to crush whatever dignity she had left, right in front of the city's elite. "Watch this," he muttered to Selina, his arrogance swelling. They stopped just a breath away from Ava. Daniel's voice was loud enough to silence the nearby crowd. "Ava, didn't expect to see you here. Shouldn't you be at home resting? After all, without me, I'm not sure how you can even afford a cab to this hotel." Selina laughed, her hand stroking Daniel's chest as if to claim him publicly. "Oh, Daniel, don't be cruel. Maybe she begged for an invitation. Poor thing must be desperate for attention. Do you think she's here to win you back?" A ripple of laughter from the surrounding guests echoed their cruelty. Ava's stomach tightened, but she refused to show pain. She locked her gaze on Daniel, her voice calm yet cutting. "You underestimate me, Daniel. You always have. But tonight, you'll see just how wrong you are." Daniel raised a brow, dismissive. "Is that a threat, Ava? You don't scare me. You're nothing but my ex-wife with a swollen belly, and soon enough, you'll fade into the background where you belong." The crowd gasped at his harshness, but Daniel relished their shock. To him, cruelty was strength. He believed he had won. He believed she had no card left to play. But Ava's silence carried a storm. She turned away without another word, her eyes locking onto the stage where the Sinclair crest gleamed above velvet curtains. Daniel had mocked her publicly, certain he'd destroyed her. But in moments, the truth about Ava's identity would shatter his world. The gala, once a glittering stage for the city's most powerful, had become a silent theater of cruelty. Guests who had come to sip champagne and gossip about mergers now leaned closer, hungry to witness the scandal unfolding between Daniel, Selina, and the woman he had abandoned. Daniel basked in it. He thrived on spectacle, on seeing others squirm under his calculated words. With every dismissive glance and mocking smirk, he worked to strip Ava of dignity. Selina, glowing in her crimson gown, matched his cruelty with sharp jabs disguised as wit. "Oh, Ava," Selina cooed, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I hope you didn't come here thinking you'd be welcomed. This is a world for winners, darling, and well, you chose the wrong man to depend on. Now look at you." Laughter rippled through a small circle of onlookers, emboldened by Daniel's arrogance. Ava's face flushed, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt the weight of every stare, the sting of every whispered judgment. Her hands instinctively moved to cradle her belly, as if shielding her unborn child from the venom surrounding her. Daniel leaned in, his tone cruel enough to pierce the music and chatter around them. "You'll regret walking into this room tonight, Ava. You don't belong here anymore. This is my world, not yours. And if you think anyone here will side with a discarded wife, you're more delusional than I thought." The words sank deep, reopening wounds Ava thought she had sealed. For a moment, her legs felt weak. She fought back tears, refusing to let them fall. But inside her chest, pain burned like fire. She remembered the promises he had made, the tender words whispered in the dark when love seemed eternal. She remembered how she believed him when he said he would be a father, a husband, a partner. And now, that same man was humiliating her in front of hundreds, parading his mistress as if she were the prize and Ava the mistake. Selena smirked and brushed a manicured hand over Daniel's shoulder, her eyes glinting with triumph. Honestly, Daniel, it's almost tragic. She still thinks she matters. Poor Ava, trying to play strong when everyone knows she's broken. Gasps scattered through the crowd, but no one stepped forward. The wealthy rarely risked their reputations for compassion. Ava stood alone in the middle of the storm, her chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. For the first time that night, she doubted herself. Was she strong enough to face this? Or had Daniel been right all along? Was she just a powerless woman, abandoned at her lowest? The music swelled as the orchestra shifted into another piece, almost mocking her silence. Ava's throat tightened, her mind screamed for escape, but her feet remained rooted. She couldn't collapse here, not in front of him. Her vision blurred as her father's lawyer standing near the stage caught her eye. He gave the faintest nod as if to remind her she wasn't finished yet. A flicker of hope stirred inside her chest. Ava inhaled slowly, steadying herself. Daniel thought he had crushed her, thought she had nothing left. But deep inside, something unbreakable was beginning to rise. He had humiliated her publicly, but what he didn't know was that this same stage would soon witness his own downfall. The night's cruel spectacle had ended for most of the guests, who drifted back to their champagne glasses and shallow conversations. But for Ava, the humiliation clung to her like a second skin. She had walked out of the ballroom with her head high, pretending the venom of Daniel's words hadn't pierced her. But once the gilded doors closed behind her, the weight of it all came crashing down. She stumbled into the deserted corridor of the hotel, the echo of her heels chasing her like ghosts. Her chest heaved, and the strength she had forced herself to show shattered the moment no eyes were watching. Ava collapsed onto a velvet bench, burying her face in trembling hands. Tears flowed freely now, hot and relentless, each drop carrying the sting of betrayal, abandonment, and shame. Her mind replayed the scene on a vicious loop. Daniel's sneer, Selena's mocking laughter, the crowd's silence. She had faced storms before, but nothing like this. The father of her unborn child discarding her as worthless, then tearing apart her dignity in public as if she were nothing more than a pawn he'd already discarded. "Why?" she whispered into the emptiness. Her voice cracked, weak and raw. "Why wasn't I enough?" The baby kicked inside her, a sharp reminder that she wasn't alone, not completely. But instead of comfort, the sensation sent another wave of panic through her. How could she raise this child alone? How could she protect an innocent life when she herself felt so broken? Her breath came in shallow bursts as fear clawed at her chest. For a fleeting moment, she wished she could vanish, dissolve into the shadows, escape the pain of being constantly measured, judged, and discarded. Her reflection in the ornate mirror across from her mocked her. A young woman with mascara-streaked cheeks, swollen eyes, and a body trembling under the weight of expectation. Daniel's words rang again in her ears. "You're nothing without me." The cruelty of it felt like a curse. What if he was right? What if she was destined to struggle, to raise a child without the power, security, and respect she desperately needed? The corridor door creaked, and Ava startled, quickly wiping her face with trembling hands. But it was only a hotel staff member, who glanced at her with quiet pity before hurrying away. Even pity cut deep tonight. She pressed her hand firmly against her belly, closing her eyes. "I'll try," she whispered to her unborn child. "I don't know how yet, but I'll try." Her phone buzzed inside her clutch. With unsteady hands, she pulled it out. Another message from her father's lawyer glowed on the screen. "Ava, you must not give up. Tomorrow, everything changes. Come to my office at noon." Her tears slowed, confusion mixed with the faintest spark of curiosity. What could possibly change tomorrow? What could he know that she didn't? Ava drew in a shaky breath, her despair still heavy but pierced now by a fragile thread of hope. She had collapsed, she had wept, but inside her heart something stirred, faint yet undeniable. The night had broken her, but tomorrow promised the first glimpse of the truth that would rebuild her. The following morning, sunlight crept across Ava's small rented room, a stark contrast to the storm raging in her heart. She had barely slept, her body weary from tears, her mind circling around Daniel's cruelty. Yet in her clutch, that message from her father's lawyer still burned like an ember, refusing to die. Tomorrow, everything changes. At precisely noon, Ava found herself standing outside a towering skyscraper on Madison Avenue. The Sinclair crest gleamed discreetly above the revolving glass doors. She hesitated, her pulse quickening. Few knew she was William Sinclair's daughter. Even fewer understood what that truly meant. For years she had buried her lineage beneath layers of silence, desperate to escape the suffocating weight of her family name. Now, stepping into this building felt like unsealing a vault she had sworn never to open. Inside, she was greeted by Jasper Hale, her father's most trusted lawyer. He was older now, his silver hair neatly combed, his sharp eyes softened by compassion as he rose from behind an oak desk. "Ava," he said gently, as though speaking to the frightened little girl he had once met years ago. "It's time." Her brows knit in confusion. "Time for what, Jasper? I don't understand. My life is falling apart. Daniel left me. I have nothing." "You have everything," Jasper interrupted firmly. He slid a folder across the desk, its leather binding embossed with the Sinclair seal. "Your mother wanted you to grow up free from the poison of money and greed. She hid you from this world for as long as she could. But she also ensured that when the time was right, you would claim what was always yours." Ava's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were documents bearing her name: trust funds, shares, real estate holdings, and a declaration of inheritance that left her breathless. Jasper's voice was steady as he explained, "You are the sole heir to the Sinclair dynasty. Every company, every holding, every estate, yours. Your father ensured no one else could touch it. You are not powerless, Ava. You are one of the wealthiest women in the world." Her breath caught. The words felt unreal, like lines from a story meant for someone else. "Me? But I've been living like nothing. Daniel thinks I'm—" "Daniel doesn't matter," Jasper said sharply. "He chose greed over love. He discarded you because he thought you were weak. But he doesn't know the truth, and that ignorance will be his undoing. Ava, you are not the victim here. You are the storm." Ava's eyes filled, not with despair this time, but with something fiercer: anger, resolve, the awakening of a power she had hidden for too long. She thought of Daniel parading Selena in front of her, mocking her publicly, reducing her to nothing. And suddenly she could see it. The moment his smirk would vanish when he realized the woman he had humiliated was untouchable. Her fingers tightened around the folder. The weight of her legacy no longer felt like chains, but like armor. Jasper leaned closer, his tone almost conspiratorial. "You have a choice. Stay silent, let him believe his lies. Or show him who Ava Sinclair truly is." Ava inhaled deeply, her tears drying into steel. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of Daniel. She was ready to destroy him. The days that followed felt like stepping into another life. Ava Sinclair, once dismissed as a powerless pregnant woman abandoned by her husband, was beginning to rise from the ashes. Her despair had not disappeared, but it had hardened into something unshakable. For the first time, she wasn't simply surviving. She was preparing for war. Jasper Hale guided her carefully, arranging private meetings, signing transfers, and unlocking accounts that had been sealed for years. Each signature Ava made felt like reclaiming a piece of herself Daniel had tried to erase. But Jasper reminded her of something even greater. "Ava, this isn't just about numbers in a bank account. It's about stepping into the role your mother always knew you'd claim: strength wrapped in grace, power hidden in humility." Ava stared at her reflection in the mirror of the Sinclair townhouse one morning. Her old clothes, worn and faded from years of modest living, no longer matched the woman she was becoming. Her cheeks were still soft from pregnancy, her eyes tired from sleepless nights, but there was a light there now, a glimmer of purpose. She whispered to herself, "No more hiding." A team was called in: stylists, designers, and advisors who had served her family for decades. They didn't just transform her outward appearance, they prepared her to re-enter a world that had once ignored her. Silk gowns draped over her figure, tailored suits highlighted her posture, and her hair, once simply tied back, now framed her face in waves that declared confidence. But Ava didn't want vanity. She wanted presence. She chose attire that spoke of dignity, not excess; elegance, not arrogance. During fittings, she caught herself thinking of Daniel. He had once mocked her for buying second-hand dresses, sneered at her frugal choices, and told her she looked like she didn't belong among the wealthy. She imagined his face the first time he saw her again, not as the wife he discarded, but as the dynasty's rightful heir. That thought alone steeled her spine. Outside of appearances, Ava immersed herself in the responsibilities of her inheritance. She studied board reports, sat through strategy sessions, and listened to Jasper explain the intricacies of Sinclair Industries. She asked sharp questions, surprising even herself with how quickly she grasped the details. There was no trace of the meek woman Daniel once controlled. This Ava was deliberate, thoughtful, and rising into her power. But late at night, when the townhouse grew quiet, Ava still felt the ache of loneliness. She touched her belly, whispering promises to the child who had unknowingly carried her through the darkest nights. "You'll never be ashamed of me," she murmured. "You'll know your mother fought for us, for our place in this world." On the eve of her first public appearance as the Sinclair heir, Jasper entered her study with a quiet smile. "The board is ready for you. The city will know tomorrow. Daniel will know." Ava closed the final folder and rose to her feet. She smoothed the silk of her navy gown, the diamonds at her wrist catching the lamplight. Her transformation was complete. She was no longer the discarded wife sobbing in silence. She was Ava Sinclair, heir to a dynasty, and soon Daniel would face the woman he had underestimated. The night of the Sinclair board gala arrived like a storm disguised in glitter. The ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel gleamed with chandeliers, every crystal catching sparks of light. The city's elite flooded the space, executives, investors, politicians, each one eager to see and be seen. But beneath the polished conversations and champagne glasses was a pulsing undercurrent. Whispers about the Sinclair heir finally stepping into the spotlight. Daniel Thorne was already there, smug as ever, with Selena Moore clinging to his arm like a trophy. He had chosen his tuxedo carefully, every detail sharp, every smile calculated. This was his arena, his chance to network with the powerful and perhaps secure another deal to boost his fragile ego. Selena, dripping in diamonds he could barely afford, giggled at every word he uttered, though her eyes scanned the crowd for signs of envy. They were laughing when the doors opened. Gasps rippled through the room. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Heads turned as Ava Sinclair entered. She wasn't just present, she was commanding. Draped in a gown of deep sapphire silk, her posture regal, her every step steady despite the child she carried, she looked like destiny in motion. The air itself seemed to shift around her. Daniel's smile froze. Selena's grip on his arm tightened. The crowd parted as Ava walked forward, acknowledging greetings with a graceful nod. She made her way to the stage where the Sinclair crest glowed above velvet curtains. The board chairman welcomed her, his voice steady but tinged with excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "tonight is not just another celebration. Tonight, we honor the rightful heir of the Sinclair dynasty, Miss Ava Sinclair." The applause thundered, but Daniel's world collapsed into silence. He turned to Selena, his face pale. "What did he just say?" Selena blinked rapidly, her smirk faltering. She's the heir? That can't be true." But it was true. As Ava took the microphone, her voice rang out with clarity that pierced the opulent hall. "For years I lived quietly, away from the shadows of my family's empire. I wanted love, not wealth. I wanted a partner, not power. But when betrayal struck, when I was humiliated and abandoned, I realized something. Strength cannot stay hidden forever. Tonight, I reclaim my name. I reclaim my legacy. And I reclaim my dignity." The crowd erupted again, a mix of awe and admiration. Daniel's mouth twisted, his arrogance crumbling in real time. He muttered, "She played me. She lied. She—" Selena pulled her arm away, her eyes narrowing as she calculated her next move. Daniel for the first time looked small. Ava's gaze swept across the audience until it landed on him. She didn't need to call him out by name. Everyone knew who he was. Her calm smile cut deeper than any insult. "To those who underestimated me, who thought I was powerless, thank you. You've reminded me that diamonds are made under pressure, and I am no longer hiding." The applause shook the chandeliers, and Daniel felt every clap like a blow. The man who once declared Ava was nothing now stood exposed, powerless in a room where she was untouchable. Daniel Thorne had always believed he could twist any situation to his advantage. For years, manipulation was his sharpest weapon, arrogance his shield. But tonight, inside the glittering ballroom, that shield cracked. As applause roared for Ava Sinclair, the woman he had mocked as worthless, Daniel felt the ground shifting beneath him. He tried to recover, forcing a laugh that rang hollow. Pulling Selina close, he muttered through clenched teeth, "She thinks she can humiliate me? Watch, I'll put her back in her place." But Selina, no longer clinging with the same blind adoration, shifted uncomfortably. "Daniel, everyone here knows now. She's Sinclair. She's untouchable. Maybe we should just—" "Don't be ridiculous," he snapped. "Money talks. Influence talks. She may have the name, but I have the connections." Fueled by pride, Daniel stalked across the ballroom, determined to steal the spotlight back. He greeted investors with exaggerated charm, trying to spin Ava's revelation as if it were nothing more than a convenient coincidence. "Ava Sinclair? Please. She's just parading a name she never earned. I've built everything I have with my own hands. She was just a housewife." But the words fell flat. The men he once impressed exchanged skeptical glances. The women who had once fawned over him now whispered behind jeweled hands. One by one, the allies Daniel counted on drifted toward Ava, eager to align themselves with power that was now undeniable. Selina's smile faded with every cold shoulder they received. She excused herself under the pretense of fixing her lipstick, but Daniel noticed the way her eyes lingered on a wealthy executive at the edge of the room. Panic gnawed at him. The mistress who once made him feel invincible was already looking for a new lifeline. Meanwhile, Ava's presence only grew stronger. She spoke with investors effortlessly, her grace disarming, her intelligence undeniable. Jasper Hale stood proudly at her side, ensuring the Sinclair crest shone brightly above the stage. To the room, Ava was no longer the discarded wife. She was the dynasty's true heir, and Daniel was nothing more than her bitter mistake. Desperate, Daniel approached the microphone, demanding the crowd's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice rising above the music, "don't be fooled. A name doesn't make someone powerful. Experience does. And let's not forget, Ava is pregnant. Do you really want the future of this empire tied to someone distracted, someone unprepared?" Gasps sliced through the room. His words, meant to weaken her, landed like poison on himself. Investors shook their heads in disapproval. To attack a pregnant woman and in public was not bold. It was vile. Ava met his outburst with calm steel. "Daniel, thank you for reminding me why I left you. You measure strength in cruelty. I measure it in resilience. And tonight, this room sees the difference." Applause thundered again, drowning him out completely. Daniel's face burned red, his composure shattered. For the first time, he realized the truth. He wasn't controlling the narrative anymore. He was the villain of the story, and the world had finally recognized it. The schemes that once made him powerful had turned into shackles, and Daniel Thorne stood publicly defeated. The ballroom was still humming from Ava's triumph when Selina slipped back into the spotlight, her crimson gown gleaming under the chandeliers. For years, she had been content to play Daniel's accessory, his hidden indulgence, his proof that he could discard one woman and easily replace her. But tonight, watching Ava Sinclair reclaim her rightful power, something shifted inside Selina. She saw Daniel not as a prize, but as a sinking ship. Daniel, humiliated by the crowd's rejection, clutched Selina's arm like a lifeline. "Stay with me," he hissed, desperation creeping into his voice. "Don't let them see us falter. We'll fight back. We'll take her down together." But Selina's eyes were cold now, calculating. "Take her down? Daniel, are you blind? She's Sinclair. She owns this room. She owns the empire. And you," she smirked cruelly, "you're the fool who threw her away." Daniel stiffened, his face flushing with anger. "Don't you dare turn on me now, after everything I've done for you." Selina let out a laugh, sharp and merciless. "Done for me? You dragged me into scandal after scandal, using me as your weapon to humiliate her. And for what? Look around, Daniel. You're not powerful, you're pitiful. They're all siding with her, and I don't plan on going down with you." Her words cut deeper than Ava's calm defiance ever could. Daniel's mouth opened to protest, but Selina slipped her arm free and sauntered toward the cluster of investors surrounding Ava. She transformed instantly, her tone sugary sweet, her smile polished as she greeted them like she belonged in their circle. "Miss Sinclair," Selina said, her voice dripping with false admiration, "I must say you look radiant tonight. I never realized how remarkable you truly are. I'd love to discuss opportunities to support your vision for Sinclair Industries." The audacity made several guests exchange amused looks. Ava, poised and serene, regarded Selena coolly. She didn't need to raise her voice to make her disdain clear. "Selena, loyalty is not something you can trade like jewelry. Aligning yourself with me now won't erase the part you played in my humiliation." Selena's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "I was misled. Daniel made promises. Promises built on lies," Ava interrupted softly, her words slicing through the noise. "And you chose to believe them because they suited your ambition. Remember that." The surrounding guests nodded in agreement. Selena's cheeks flushed, but she forced another smile, retreating with a glass of champagne. She had switched sides too late, and everyone could see it. Daniel, watching helplessly from across the room, felt the final threads of his world unravel. The woman he flaunted as his victory had abandoned him in front of the very people whose approval he craved. He reached for another drink, his hand shaking, his arrogance crumbling. Ava didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Every move Selena made, every word she spoke, only deepened Daniel's humiliation. The mistress he had sacrificed his marriage for had turned into his executioner. And as the crowd closed around Ava with admiration, Daniel stood isolated, betrayed by the very woman he thought would secure his throne. The night should have ended with Daniel quietly slinking away. But Ava knew that humiliation alone wasn't enough. Daniel was a man who thrived on schemes, and as long as people believed he had influence, he would claw his way back into relevance. If she wanted to close this chapter for good, she needed to show the world who he truly was. And tonight, she had the perfect weapon. As the music softened and the board chairman prepared to thank the guests for attending, Ava stepped forward once more. Her sapphire gown shimmered under the spotlight, but it wasn't her beauty that silenced the room. It was the calm fire in her eyes. "Before this night ends," Ava began, her voice steady, "there's something that must be addressed. I've been quiet for too long, but silence only protects the guilty. Tonight, that ends." The crowd stirred. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. He forced a laugh, waving dismissively. "Oh, here we go again, playing the victim for sympathy. Ava, you should be thanking me for ever giving you a place in this world." But Ava didn't falter. She signaled to Jasper Hale, who handed her a sleek black folder. She held it high enough for all to see. "These are financial records, contracts and communications gathered over the last 3 years. Evidence that Daniel Thorne has been funneling company funds, manipulating investors, and using Sinclair contacts, without authorization, to enrich himself and cover debts." Gasps swept through the ballroom, heads turned toward Daniel, whose face drained of color. "Lies," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Fabrications. She's desperate to ruin me because I left her. You can't believe this." Ava opened the folder, pulling out a single sheet. "Shall I read the email where you promised Selena shares in exchange for helping you sabotage board votes? Or should I start with the bank transfers hidden under shell corporations? Every document is verified, Daniel, and tonight I'm making them public." A hush fell. The very investors Daniel had tried to court now recoiled, murmuring among themselves. Journalists in the room scrambled to capture her words, cameras flashing as they sensed the scandal of the year unfolding live. Daniel lunged toward her, his desperation boiling over. "You think you can destroy me? I made you. You were nothing without me." Security stepped in, blocking his advance. Ava didn't flinch. She simply met his rage with an icy calm. "No, Daniel. You were nothing without me, and now the world sees it." Selena, standing off to the side, sipped her champagne with thinly veiled satisfaction. She had already abandoned him, and now, watching him unravel, she didn't bother to hide her smirk. The board chairman cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Effective immediately, we will review these documents. If they are as you say, Miss Sinclair, Mr. Tussac Thorne will face not only removal from any dealings with Sinclair Industries, but potential criminal charges." The room erupted, some with outrage, others with admiration. Ava closed the folder, her expression serene. Daniel's empire of lies had finally collapsed, and Ava was the one who pulled the trigger. The gala hall was chaos. Investors whispered furiously, journalists rushed to draft headlines, and guests traded looks of shock and intrigue. In the middle of it all stood Daniel Thorne, his composure shattered, his arrogance crumbling. He had been exposed, stripped bare in front of the very society he once ruled with swagger. But Daniel was not a man who surrendered easily. Humiliation had only ignited his desperation. He shook off the security guard's grip, straightened his tuxedo jacket, and raised his voice above the noise. "You all think this is the truth? You're being manipulated. Ava Sinclair is nothing but a spoiled heiress playing a role. She didn't earn this power. She inherited it, and now she's using her wealth to destroy me." The crowd didn't buy it. Murmurs of disapproval rippled outward, but Daniel pressed on, his tone laced with desperation. "Look at her, standing there with her polished speeches and fancy gown. Do you really think she has the brains to run an empire? She's weak. She's emotional. She's pregnant. That child will make her soft, distracted, incapable. You'll regret ever trusting her." The words were a dagger aimed at Ava, but instead of cutting her down, they backfired spectacularly. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Investors shook their heads, appalled at his cruelty. Even Selena, leaning against a marble column, rolled her eyes and muttered, "Pathetic." Ava didn't flinch. She let him rant, let him flail like a man drowning in the waters he once commanded. When the crowd quieted, she simply lifted her chin and said, "You reveal more about yourself with every word, Daniel. Your hatred for me is nothing but fear. Fear that the world will finally see what you've hidden all along, that your empire was built on lies, deceit, and arrogance. And now, stripped of that, you are nothing." The ballroom erupted in applause, drowning Daniel's protests. Security stepped forward again, but this time it was the board chairman who raised a hand. "Enough, Mr. Thorne. Your behavior tonight has confirmed every suspicion. We will pursue legal action. You are finished here." Panic flared in Daniel's eyes. He turned, searching for allies, but found none. Investors avoided his gaze. Old friends turned their backs. Selena smirked as she clinked glasses with another man, already replacing him. Desperation drove him to his final act. He pointed at Ava, his voice hoarse with rage. "This isn't over. You think you've beaten me? I'll drag you down with me. I'll tell the world everything I know about your family, your past, everything you tried to hide. You don't deserve this dynasty. You don't deserve any of it." The room fell silent at his outburst. Ava stepped forward, her sapphire gown catching the light, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. "Tell them, Daniel. Shout every lie you can invent, but the truth always stands taller, and tonight the truth has already spoken." Security seized him, escorting him toward the exit as he shouted and struggled. His voice faded under the weight of applause for Ava. Daniel had made his last stand, and it had ended in disgrace. The morning after the gala, New York's skyline seemed brighter, as if the city itself knew a shift had occurred. Newspapers splashed Ava Sinclair's name across their front pages. "Heiress exposes corrupt ex-husband at Sinclair Gala." Headlines praised her courage, her composure, and her stunning emergence as the sole heir to one of the world's most powerful dynasties. Inside the Sinclair corporate headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. For years, the board had operated in the shadow of William Sinclair's legacy, wary of the day they would have to face the future without him. Now, that future had arrived in the form of his daughter, Ava, calm, resolute, and undeniably in command. The boardroom was filled with polished oak, gleaming glass, and the tense anticipation of men and women who had built careers on control. Ava entered not as the timid wife they once gossiped about, but as a woman transformed. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, her hair pulled back elegantly, she radiated authority. At her side was Jasper Hale, whose steady presence reminded the board that Ava had not come unprepared. One of the directors, a stern man with silver spectacles, cleared his throat. "Miss Sinclair, last night was dramatic, but emotion cannot run a dynasty. Do you have the vision to lead us, or was last night just a performance?" Ava met his challenge head-on. "My father built this empire on integrity and innovation. I intend to honor that. Last night wasn't a performance, it was a promise. Sinclair Industries will not be corrupted by men like Daniel Thorne. And as of today, every decision we make will reflect strength, transparency, and vision." The room fell quiet. Even the skeptics felt the weight of her words. She wasn't demanding respect, she was commanding it. Shafteinig. Jasper placed a thick stack of documents on the table. "Here are the legal confirmations of Miss Sinclair's full inheritance. She is the sole majority shareholder, effective immediately. The dynasty belongs to her." The directors exchanged uneasy glances, then one by one nodded in acknowledgement. Ava's authority was no longer theoretical. It was written in ink and bound by law. Still, Ava didn't bask in the victory. She leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table. I know some of you doubt me because I'm young, because I'm pregnant, because I haven't spent decades in these halls. But I will prove myself, not with words, but with results. You'll see that my strength comes not in spite of those things, but because of them. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Slowly the tide turned in her favor. By the time the meeting adjourned, Ava Sinclair was no longer seen as a fragile heiress stepping into her father's shadow. She was the dynasty's rightful leader. As she left the boardroom, cameras flashed, reporters shouting her name. She paused at the marble steps, the wind catching her hair as she looked out at the city. This was her moment, not just of survival, but of conquest. Ava had secured control of the dynasty, and Daniel's downfall was now sealed in stone. For Daniel Thorne, the morning was not bright. It was suffocating. His phone buzzed relentlessly, not with deals and opportunities, but with calls from creditors, lawyers, and reporters demanding comment on the scandal that had unfolded. Every news outlet had splashed his downfall across headlines. Disgraced ex-husband exposed by heiress. His once carefully polished image of power had crumbled overnight. Sitting in his penthouse, Daniel stared at the piles of unopened bills and eviction notices. His company's shares had plummeted, investors had pulled out, and even his so-called friends had cut ties. Selena, once his prized accessory, had already abandoned him. He had tried calling her, begging for another chance, but her number was disconnected. She had traded him for the next wealthy target without hesitation. Daniel poured himself a drink at 10 in the morning, his hands trembling. "She'll regret this," he muttered, though the words sounded weak even to his own ears. Deep down, he knew the truth. Ava hadn't just humiliated him. She had ended him. Meanwhile, Ava Sinclair was building something stronger. Her first week as the head of the Sinclair dynasty was a whirlwind of meetings, press conferences, and strategy sessions. Cameras followed her every step, but instead of pitying glances, she was now met with admiration and respect. When she walked into the Sinclair Tower, staff greeted her with genuine smiles. They whispered about how different she was from her father. Warmer, more approachable, yet equally commanding. She didn't just sit behind a desk. She listened, asked questions, and inspired loyalty in ways Daniel never could. At a press event, Ava addressed the scandal with poise. The Sinclair dynasty stands for resilience, responsibility, and respect. We will not allow corruption or arrogance to define us. My past does not weaken me, it strengthens me. And I will lead this company with both heart and determination. The applause that followed wasn't polite, it was thunderous. Investors who had once doubted her were now eager to align themselves with her vision. Partnerships blossomed. Media outlets painted her as a symbol of modern strength. A woman who had endured betrayal but emerged unbreakable. But behind the success, Ava remained grounded. Late at night, she sat in her townhouse nursery, stroking her belly, whispering to the child she carried. "Everything I'm building now, it's for you. You will never doubt your worth. You will never feel abandoned." While Ava thrived, Daniel descended deeper into ruin. Paparazzi caught photos of him stumbling out of bars, his once pristine suits now wrinkled and stained. His accounts were frozen, lawsuits piled higher each day, and whispers of possible jail time circled the city. Those who once envied him now mocked him, calling him a cautionary tale of greed and arrogance. And though Ava never gloated, she didn't have to. The contrast was stark enough. The man who tried to destroy her had destroyed himself, while the woman he underestimated had become untouchable. Daniel faced ruin. Ava rose higher, and the balance of power had finally shifted for good. Rain pounded the streets of Manhattan, but Daniel Thorne didn't care. His once polished shoes splashed through puddles, his suit soaked and wrinkled. He looked nothing like the man who had once strutted through boardrooms with arrogance. Desperation had stripped him bare. His destination, the Sinclair townhouse. He had nothing left to lose, and Ava was his last hope. Inside, Ava sat in the nursery, rocking gently in a chair as she hummed softly to her unborn child. The room glowed with warmth. Soft blue walls, shelves lined with storybooks, and a crib carved from polished oak. It was a sanctuary she had built herself, a promise that her child would never feel the emptiness she once endured. The doorbell rang. Her heart tightened, but she expected Jasper or one of her advisors. When she opened the door, the sight before her made her freeze. Daniel stood there, rain dripping from his hair, his eyes bloodshot and hollow. For a moment they stared at each other, like memories crashing between them, the love they once shared, the betrayal, the cruelty. Ava's stomach twisted. "Please," Daniel rasped, his voice raw. "Let me in." Against her better judgment, she stepped aside. He stumbled inside, collapsing onto the couch. Ava remained standing, her arms crossed, her eyes cold. "What do you want, Daniel?" He buried his face in his hands. I lost everything. The investors, the company, even Selena. She left me the moment the money dried up. I've been a fool, Ava. I thought I was untouchable. But without you, I'm nothing. Ava's chest tightened, but not with pity. She had heard these words before, spoken in different forms, always meant to manipulate. She stayed silent, letting him squirm under the weight of his own downfall. He looked up, tears streaking his face. "I'm begging you, forgive me, take me back, for the baby's sake, for everything we once had. I can change. I swear I can change." Ava's hand instinctively rested on her belly, feeling the faint movement of the child within. For a split second, she imagined what it would be like if Daniel truly changed. If he became the man she once believed him to be. But the memory of his laughter, as he mocked her at the gala, the sound of Selena's cruel taunts, and the sting of his betrayal burned away any illusion. Her voice was steady when she finally spoke. "Daniel, the night you threw me away, you killed any chance of us ever rebuilding. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed our child. You mocked me, humiliated me, left me to suffer alone. That isn't love. That isn't something I can forgive." His face crumpled. "Please, Ava, I have nowhere else to go." Ava's eyes hardened. "That's not my problem anymore." She stood tall, her strength undeniable. "You chose this path, and now you'll live with the consequences." She opened the door, the storm outside roaring louder. Security arrived at her silent signal, ready to escort him away. Daniel staggered to his feet, his eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time, it was Ava who turned her back on him. And Daniel realized his pleas could never undo what he had destroyed. The storm of Daniel's desperate visit had passed, but its echo lingered. Ava sat alone in her study the next morning, reviewing reports stacked high on her desk. She was no longer just a woman surviving betrayal. She was a leader responsible for the future of an empire. And though her resolve was iron, she knew she couldn't build this future alone. That realization came to life when Jasper Hale entered the room, followed by two figures whose presence commanded immediate respect. The first was Eleanor Price, CEO of a global investment firm and one of her father's oldest allies. Known for her shrewd intelligence and fearlessness in a male-dominated world, Eleanor carried herself with the quiet confidence of a woman who had fought too many battles to ever retreat. The second was Victor Chen, a tech magnate whose innovations had reshaped entire industries. He was younger than Eleanor, but his influence was immense. His sharp eyes studied Ava carefully, as if measuring whether she was worthy of standing among them. "Ava," Eleanor began, her voice warm but firm, "your father always believed you would rise when the time was right. Last night proved him correct. The world saw your strength, and so did we. But strength must be supported. That's why we're here." Ava stood, steady despite the swell of emotion in her chest. "You're offering me your support?" Victor nodded. "Support, yes, but also partnership." Daniel's collapse left gaps in the market. Gaps vultures will try to exploit. If you want Sinclair Industries to thrive, you'll need allies powerful enough to shield you and bold enough to help you expand. Jasper placed a file on the desk. Inside were proposals for joint ventures, opportunities that could cement Sinclair's dominance for decades to come. But beyond the business, Ava saw something deeper. Trust. These were not opportunists like Daniel or Selena. These were giants of industry who saw in her not weakness but potential. Still, Ava hesitated. "Why me? Why not take over yourselves?" Eleanor's smile was faint but genuine. "Because you're the future, Ava. You have what most leaders lack, humility forged through suffering. You know what it means to be underestimated, discarded. That makes you dangerous in the best way. We don't want to replace you. We want to stand beside you." Ava's throat tightened, but she steadied her voice. "Then I accept, not for myself alone, but for this child and for every person who believes power can be wielded with integrity." The alliance was sealed not with handshakes but with something stronger: mutual respect. Ava felt her shoulders lighten, the burden of leadership shared by those who believed in her. That afternoon, news spread quickly. Eleanor Price and Victor Chen had aligned with Ava Sinclair, solidifying her position at the top of New York's power structure. Headlines shifted from scandal to triumph. Sinclair heiress forms alliance with titans of industry. In a penthouse across the city, Daniel saw the news flash across the television. His glass shattered against the floor as rage consumed him. Every move Ava made was another nail in his coffin. And now, with allies surrounding her, Ava was no longer just surviving the dynasty, she was redefining it. The ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria shimmered under golden light. It was the annual Global Business Leaders Forum, a stage where the most powerful voices in finance, technology, and politics converged. For Ava Sinclair, it was more than just another event. It was the arena where she would close the book on Daniel Thorne, once and for all. She stood backstage, her navy gown draped elegantly, her hair swept into a crown of waves. Her hand rested on her stomach, steadying herself with the heartbeat of the child within. Jasper Hale gave her a reassuring nod. "This is your moment, Ava. Speak the truth. The world is listening." Meanwhile, in the crowd, Daniel had forced his way in. Disgraced, bankrupt, and barely clinging to relevance, he had bribed his way into the event, desperate to seize one last chance to reclaim power. His suit was ill-fitted, his eyes wild, but his arrogance remained. He muttered under his breath, "She won't win. Not this time. I'll expose her. I'll remind them who I am." When Ava took the stage, the room fell silent. She looked out at the sea of expectant faces, leaders who could shape economies with a word. And then, calmly, she began. "For too long, power has been defined by arrogance. Men who thought cruelty was strength, manipulation was intelligence, and betrayal was strategy. I know this because I lived it. I was humiliated, discarded, told I was nothing without him." She let her gaze flicker briefly toward Daniel, who shifted uncomfortably under the spotlight of her words. "But the truth is this: strength isn't found in cruelty. It's found in resilience. It's found in rising after you've been broken, in standing firm when the world tells you to crumble. And tonight, I stand before you not as a victim, but as the leader of a dynasty built on integrity." The audience erupted in applause, but Daniel shot to his feet, his voice cutting through the noise. "Don't believe her. She's playing you all. She's hiding behind her family's money. Without me, she'd still be a nobody in a bookstore." Gasps echoed. Cameras swiveled toward him. Security moved in, but Ava raised her hand, silencing the room. "Daniel," she said, her tone steady, "you've spent your life convincing yourself that tearing others down makes you powerful. But look around. You've lost your company, your allies, your mistress, and your dignity. And now, the world sees you for what you are: a cautionary tale of greed and arrogance." The room broke into thunderous applause. Daniel struggled against security, his face twisted with rage, but his words were drowned beneath the crowd's approval for Ava. Reporters scribbled furiously, headlines already forming in their minds. "Heiress condemns ex-husband in fiery speech." As Daniel was dragged from the hall, his shouts fading into silence, Ava closed her speech with calm authority. "Power should not corrupt. Power should inspire. And I promise you, under my leadership, Sinclair will do just that." The standing ovation shook the chandeliers. Cameras flashed like lightning. Ava had not just defeated Daniel, she had erased him. And in that moment, Ava Sinclair secured her place in history, while Daniel Thorne was left to vanish into disgrace. The months that followed the showdown at the Waldorf Astoria were a whirlwind. Newspapers and television anchors praised Ava Sinclair as the face of a new era in business. Her speech had gone viral, shared across the globe as a rallying cry for resilience and integrity. Investors poured into Sinclair Industries, eager to stand behind a leader who had proven herself not through arrogance but through strength, forged in suffering. But while the world celebrated her as a titan, Ava's focus shifted inward. Each day, her child grew stronger, and with every heartbeat she felt inside her, the pain of the past slowly transformed into something healing. She had faced humiliation, betrayal, and abandonment, but now she was ready to embrace something purer than power: motherhood. On a quiet spring morning, the townhouse was filled, not with board reports or flashing cameras, but with the steady rhythm of Ava's breathing as she held her newborn son for the first time. His tiny fingers curled around hers with surprising strength, his soft cries filling the room like music. Tears welled in Ava's eyes, but they were not the tears of despair she had once shed. They were tears of release, of catharsis. She whispered softly, her voice trembling, "You are my light. You are the reason I survived." The child blinked up at her as if he already understood. Jasper Hale visited later that day, his usually stern expression softening at the sight of the infant. "He carries the Sinclair legacy now," he said gently. "But more than that, he carries your love. That's something money can't measure." Ava smiled, cradling her son closer. "He won't grow up in a world of lies. He'll know honesty, strength, and compassion. He'll never have to doubt his worth." The nursery glowed in the morning light, its walls painted with scenes of hot air balloons and endless skies. It was a room built not out of wealth, but out of hope. Every detail, every toy, every blanket was chosen with care, with the promise of a future free from the shadows of betrayal. Outside, the world still buzzed with Ava's name. Magazines hailed her as the heiress who redefined power. Business schools dissected her strategy, teaching students about resilience in the face of ruin. Yet inside her home, Ava discovered a peace she had never known. She didn't need their applause to feel complete. She had her son, and in him, she found everything she had ever wanted. Far across the city, Daniel Thorne sat in a dingy apartment, watching the news coverage of Ava with bitterness clawing at his chest. He had nothing left. No allies, no wealth, no family. And the cruelest truth of all was that the woman he once called nothing was now everything he had tried and failed to be. As night fell, Ava rocked her son gently, humming a lullaby her mother once sang to her. The pain of the past dissolved with each note, replaced by serenity. Ava had finally healed. Betrayal no longer defined her. Love did. The city that once whispered pity about Ava Sinclair now spoke her name with reverence. Her journey from abandoned wife to dynasty leader had become the story of resilience that inspired millions. But for Ava, the truest victory was not found in headlines or boardrooms. It was in the quiet certainty that justice had been served and a new legacy had begun. Weeks after her son's birth, Ava attended a press conference at Sinclair Tower. The lobby was filled with reporters, cameras flashing as she stepped to the podium. Her tailored ivory suit gleamed under the lights, her posture regal yet gentle. At her side was Jasper Hale, holding documents that would finalize the last chapter of Daniel Thorne's disgrace. "Today," Ava began, her voice carrying strength and serenity, "Sinclair Industries reaffirms its commitment to integrity and transparency. The investigations into Daniel Thorne's misconduct are complete. He will face criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and corporate sabotage. Justice has spoken, not for me alone, but for every person who has ever been silenced by arrogance and cruelty." Applause filled the hall. Reporters shouted questions, but Ava simply raised a hand, signaling calm. "This isn't just the end of his story. It's the beginning of ours. The Sinclair dynasty will not be remembered for scandal, but for hope, innovation, and humanity. That is the promise I make to you and to my son." The crowd erupted again, not just in applause, but in admiration. Ava had not only won her battle, she had transformed her pain into purpose. Later that evening, she returned home to the townhouse, where the nursery glowed softly in lamplight. Her son slept peacefully in his crib, his tiny chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Ava leaned over, brushing a gentle kiss across his forehead. "You'll grow up knowing that your mother never gave up, that no matter how broken the world tried to make her, she rose, and you will rise too." Outside her window, the city sparkled. Eleanor Price and Victor Chen had already begun working with her on bold new ventures, allies who would help ensure Sinclair Industries grew stronger than ever. Employees who once feared change now felt pride in their leader. And families across the city whispered her story to their daughters at night, a woman betrayed but never defeated, who turned pain into power. Far away, Daniel Thorne faced his reckoning. The man who once mocked Ava as nothing now stood alone, stripped of wealth, influence, and dignity. The irony was bitter. He had lost everything in the pursuit of power, while the woman he tried to destroy had gained everything by standing in her truth. As Ava sat by the window, rocking slowly in her chair, she let the peace settle deep in her soul. She no longer feared the shadows of the past. She had carved out light, not just for herself, but for her child, for her family's name, and for every woman who had ever been told she was powerless. The story was complete, betrayal answered with justice, heartbreak transformed into healing, and a legacy secured for generations to come. So that's it, my dear friends. The story has come to a close. And if you're still here, listening until this very moment, then something in Ava's journey must have touched your heart. Maybe it reminded you of your own struggles, of the times you were underestimated, abandoned, or told you were not enough. And yet, like Ava, you kept going. The message in this story is simple but powerful. Pain can either break you or build you. Betrayal, loss, humiliation, none of these define who you are. What defines you is how you rise from them. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Ava's life is living proof of that wisdom. She turned suffering into strength and weakness into resilience. And isn't that what life constantly asks of us? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Daniel's cruelty was Ava's impediment, but instead of destroying her, it became the very path that led her to power, dignity, and healing. Friends, you don't need to inherit a dynasty to live this truth. Every day we face storms that test us, and every day we get to choose whether to sink in bitterness or rise in courage. Ava's story is not just entertainment. It's a mirror, reminding us that no betrayal, no cruelty, and no loss can erase the strength that already lives within us. So if this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let's keep building a community where stories don't just entertain, but heal. Because as Ava proved, and as life itself teaches, what was meant to break us can become the very reason we rise.